equals who is one stranger you remember. I used to work at an animal hospital where we boarded animals. One dog, Shanghai, a pitbull, Sharp Amix, was a regular. One day, walking downtown, I saw her on a walk with her owner. She broke free and ran to me with kisses. The utter confusion on her owner's, who I'd never met, face was hilarious and memorable. I explained how I knew her, and all was well, but a funny, totally funny to think about your pets having friends you've never met. That must have been confusing, but hilarious for the owner. I no dogs in the town I live in. By looks, but never really looked at their owners. I sometimes wonder what they are doing if I haven't seen them for a while. I guess I remember dog strangers from time to time. I was also greeted by people who I've never met before, knowing our family dog when taking her on walks. A woman named Harriet at a coffee shop. I let her cut in line because I had a large order. After she ordered, she joined all her friends who were there to celebrate her birthday. She was absolutely beaming during their celebration. She was really nice, and it was probably her 72nd birthday if I had to guess. I still ask myself, what would Harriet do when I'm trying to be an optimist about life? IDKY, but she was just that pleasant. That's lovely. She sounds precious. Harriet. Hard-hearted harbinger of haggis. Lovely story. Amazing how such a small interaction could have such an impact on your life. Gretch Handler 286 points 15 hours ago, edited 15 hours ago. I drove a moped around Thailand last year and went to a place called Monkey Mountain. As soon as I arrived at the top of the mountain, I was surrounded by 30-plus monkeys looking for food, drinks, and whatever that was in my moped. The monkeys were all over me, jumping, scratching, pulling my hair. So I got off my moped, parked it, locked the seat, and went further up the mountain to see the scenery. Upon my return, one of the larger dominant males had stayed behind and ripped open my seat and chewed a massive hole in the upholstery. He was close to opening the locked seat when I started yelling and throwing my hands in the air. That didn't do anything, so I tried getting closer, making myself look larger, yelling, etc., and nothing worked. I finally got too close and the monkey opened his mouth to reveal two large teeth easily 3 inches long. The teeth worried me, so I backed off. By this time the monkey has broken the seat opened and is reaching for my things. Just as I thought my stuff was long gone, suddenly a Buddhist monk appeared behind me. Without me even saying anything, he leisurely walked up to the moped and made a silent shoo motion to the monkey about 7 feet away. The monkey casually just gets up like he wasn't doing anything and walks away. I yelled "thank you" to the monk and he gave me a smile, nod, and kept walking like a total badass. What a fucking boss. One gesture man. When I was graduating high school, my mom took me to get a suit for the ceremony. I remember thinking the girl at the checkout counter was really cute, and only a year or two older than I was. Being the obnoxious teen I was, I tried to act cool and pretend my mom wasn't there. Of course my mom was having none of that, and made sure to tease me in front of her about how messy my room was and how I never hung up my clothes. The cashier laughed and told me, "She's right, you know. Girls like guys who are neat and tidy." Needless to say, I went beet red and was mortified at not only being teased by my mom, but also by a random cute girl. But ever since that day, I have always tried to make sure my room is clean and that I actually care for my clothes. Thank you, random cashier, for helping me be a better, cleaner person. But wasn't it mostly your mom who did that? If you clean your room, you might get to first base. Say no more. Quote, I remember noticing a cute girl. She was walking with some friends. I was maybe 13. She looked the same age. Dad was driving. He seen me notice them. He drives by them real slow. UTS. Summer so windows are already down. Then he screams, "Hey boy, stop staring at those girls, you think THEYRE cute, or something." They giggled. I died 10 months ago. I got into a horrific motorcycle accident and found myself laying on the street, dying. The ground was scorching as I live in Arizona where we often have temperatures pushing 120 degrees Fahrenheit. I was being cooked alive by the pavement until a passerby jumped out of his work truck, picked me up and put me on a moving blanket. I don't remember his face, but I remember his actions. He called an ambulance and waited with me until they came. Whoever you are, thank you. You deserve more than a comment on Reddit. If for some reason you are reading this, PM me, please. I still have your moving blanket. Edit. My wreck happened between Wrecker and McDowell on the 202 and the 90 degrees curve. Not sure if that might help find this guy. Make this a whole post. 2 years ago I saved someone's life by doing CPR. When the ambulance arrived, I left the scene like I had stolen his wallet. I was in fact in deep shock state, and had some sort of PTSD for 3 full months after that. Maybe more. Can't remember. That's why I never tried to make myself known. So I never had a thank you. And I think it would have been great to help me out of trauma. I hope you find your guy. I agree. This needs to be a separate post. My best friend died, and when I was leaving the experience on a plane, I had been up all night, drinking and crying. I was a nervous wreck on the plane, but I was trying to keep it together. I put my head against the seat back in front of me during the takeoff. I felt so unsafe and alone. She put her hand on my back the whole takeoff. It was the most comforting thing. She had a cat in a crate, and once we're off of the ground, she took it out and let me hold it. This was 15 years ago, but I will never forget her. That's really sweet of her. Sorry to hear about your best friend. An old, homeless-looking man once approached me while I was eating a sandwich and said, "How come we can't eat grass like sheep do?" Quote. And I responded, "Well, they have different digestive systems." And he said, "Oh, so it's God's fault, is it?" Quote. I mean, I guess. He wanted your sandwich by the sounds of it. We can eat grass. Sheep just eat a lot of it, about 5% of their body weight in grass each day. That they need a specialized digestive system. But humans can eat grass, just not in bulk. I think he wanted your sandwich. I was on a flight from Europe back to the US to visit home. It was me, my wife, and our 6-month-old baby. We were sitting next to some Swiss dude who was really friendly. We chatted a bit when we weren't busy with diapers and doing baby things. At any rate, we had a 5-hour layover in DC, and about 2 hours into the layover I hear someone yelling, "Hey, excuse me." It was Swiss guy. He was sitting in a restaurant and saw us walking by. He wanted to tell us that we had forgotten our baby's blanket on the plane, but he remembered that we were flying on to Dallas after our layover, so he found out which terminal gate our flight was leaving from and took the blanket there and gave it to the gate staff with a handwritten description of us for the staff and a handwritten note for us. ICIVAC. La. That is beautiful. Impartial Hattie 120.16 hours ago, edited 8 hours ago. This comes from not too long ago, but they still had a lasting impact on me. Brief description for those who don't want to read an essay. I met a guy named Darian in a 711 bathroom who was treating someone who was seizing from an overdose and told me to help him stabilize them enough to be transported to the hospital. Darian later turned out to be my mentor when I signed up for EMT training. So I live in a pretty bad area in Chicago, and that goes without saying that I've made a few bad decisions here or there, but I've also made a couple of friends through it. One person in particular really helped me decide what I want to be when I graduate. Anyways, it started out as a pretty normal day. I was riding with some friends who had just pulled some money together to pimp out the van, which we dubbed the hustle wagon. They take me along because, well, I'm white and most people in our area aren't threatened by a white kid. Hopping ahead in this story, we were running low on gas, and so we stopped to fuel up. I decided I wanted to take a leak, so I head into the 711 bathroom. Already a poor choice, only to witness a man seizing with what looks to be a guy in his mid-40s trying to help me, and the old dude make eye contact and shouts, "The fuck? Someone glue you in place, come help me." I was utterly confused and quite frightened by what was going on, but nonetheless moved to help. The old guy, whose name I later learned was Darian, found the patient not too long before I did, shooting up. Darian instructed me that we need to, above all else, get him away from any flickering lights or loud noises and try to calm and stabilize him. I went and turned out the lights and texted my buddies to tell them to go on home and that he'll meet up with them to avoid any other issues. Darian paged his phone. I don't know what it was, but he later told me after we had the patient wheeled away in an ambulance to the nearest hospital. After some cool down and briefing of the paramedic who was left to get info on the patient, he looked to the old man who instructed me and said, "So Darian, this the new trainee or just some unlucky kid who follows you around?" It took me a minute to connect the dots, but apparently Darian was an EMT. I must have looked stunned silly because Darian smiled and said, "Way to handle yourself, kid. I don't know many boys your age who could handle something so stressful." I ended up signing on for a vocational my school offered, where I would intern and train to become an EMT myself. So all in all, I think Darian was one of the realest and probably most cool people I've met so far in life. If you're out there somewhere, I hope you're doing good and still saving lives in local gas station bathrooms. TLDR, me and a stranger named Darian saved a life in a 711 bathroom, which influenced me to sign up for training to be an EMT, where I met Darian the stranger again while I trained under him. In college, my roommate pissed me off for not doing chores, so I left in anger and went to the bar right by my apartment, sat down next to this older gentleman, and we chatted over beer. The dude goes on to tell me he trains professional sled dogs in Alaska and was down visiting family, and he was telling me all about how you train these dogs and the weather you have to endure. It was honestly really cool. Eventually we finished our beers and went our dear 8 ways, and I still think about him from time to time. I thought you learned how to train dogs and you then tamed your roommate so he'll do chores. Reminds me of a time I was super wasted in a pub in my area, stuffing my face with chips and dip, and an older British private airline pilot dude was in there telling me how sad and lonely and depressed he was living all the way out here and never seeing family, and my drunk ass just TLE. I feel you, man. You want some chips and queso? And he at least laughed and said, "Ah, I do love you Americans. Hope he is doing better." I opened a door for a super old guy and his wife. The guy stopped, gently touched my arm, and said, "I've lived in this town for 92 years and not once has anyone opened a door for me. Bless you." He gave me a giant, toothless smile, shuffled into the building. His wife gave my arm a pat and a big smile as she walked in after him. I was in a really bad place psychologically, and that was the first positive interaction I had had with anyone in months. It made me sob with happiness. I think of that guy often and I wonder how he is doing. I live with depression. When I am low, I still manage to get to work and sleepwalk through my day and all that, but I've noticed that during those times, I tend to be more helpful to others, especially with people who look lost on the subway. My problems always seem so insurmountable, so I think I look for problems I can solve just to take my mind off of my own shit. I think I empathize with that feeling of being completely lost and alone. The smallest effort on my part can be a huge relief for the other person. So even if I can't solve my own problems, I can still do something to make this world a little more bearable. Little by little that helps me crawl. Of tall OKT1A. Wholesome. This is pretty dark. But one day I was walking home from university and I found a woman on a bridge taking her shoes off. I never talk to people unless I have to, but this seemed really suspicious, so I decided to ask her if she was okay. She had clearly moved here from the Middle East and spoke hardly any English, but I managed to convince her to leave the bridge with me. She started telling me that she was there to meet her son and I didn't need to worry. I managed to convince myself I was wrong. She'd only taken her shoes off. I agreed to leave her to wait for her son, but went around the other side where she couldn't see me and waited to see if she went back up. After 10 minutes or so I'd lost sight of her and she had not gone back up, so I slowly started to walk home with the bridge still in sight. After getting a little way down the road, I saw the woman go back up. I headed back to the bridge and got to the bottom only in time to see her fall 10 meters head first to the ground. This still haunts me for two reasons. One, I didn't trust my instincts to get her the help she needed, and two, she was clearly determined to try and kill herself and I made her last minutes harder. That is honestly pretty sad, but at least you tried. You should seek help from a therapist or so, since it's a pretty big incident to remove from your memory. You know, as someone who has struggled with depression all my life, I have to raise this point. You don't know what she was navigating or how impossible her mountain to overcome was. But when she decided to take her fate into her own hands, you restored her faith in humanity a little bit. We are such tribal animals that we crave the feeling of togetherness. Even though her time was up, someone cared enough to try. Maybe I'm a softie, but my initial reaction was that you probably made her last time on Earth a little bit better. Good human. So many cultures have the remove shoes before killing yourself thing that I just shudder every time I see a random pair of shoes neatly tucked away anywhere. At least you tried to help her. It takes training and patience. I was walking back to my car and I thought I saw someone I knew, so I said, "Hey, how are you?" and hugged them. They hugged me back, then we looked at each other and we didn't know one another. This makes my body just have that weird feeling when you hear nails against blackboards. I don't know the word for it in English, but it's Ngelu in mine. Ngee plus Lu. I danced with a stranger in a club in Tokyo who, by the look of her dance style, was Brazilian. She was probably 80, young, and boy did she have moves. This was my first time dancing with a stranger and her vibes were something I'll never forget. She was classy. You just reminded me of a similar experience with a stranger at the Pacific Rim nightclub in Madison. Why, a mature Latin man asked me to dance. He was so good and lead extremely well. It was like he just threw me where I needed to be and my feet complied. My friends were impressed. They said, "I didn't know you could dance like that." To which I replied that I didn't either. That was about 20 years ago. I so enjoyed that dance and will never forget him. Extra props for having a life that sounds like a Murakami novel. Kate 9819 60.16 hours ago, edited 5 hours ago. A boy with blue eyes. I walked down the hallway at school and looked him right in the eyes. I never forgot. That was 10 years ago or something. He stayed a stranger until last year, when I became friends with a girl that wanted me to meet her friends too. Now that boy with the blue eyes is my best friend. Edited a few mistakes. Aha. When I was about 13 or 14, my phone ran out when I was waiting for a bus. But I realized my bus wasn't arriving for 2 hours as it was a Sunday night and I don't live in a big city. So bus times are varied. I knew I had to call my parents, but I was very shy and too nervous to ask anybody. But a really lovely mother noticed I was looking very anxious and came and asked if I was okay. She let me use her phone, but then she also stayed with me until my bus came because it was late at night and she didn't want me there alone. I think about her a lot. She was so caring and loving. Once a little girl, around 6 to 7 years old, came into our precinct and confessed that she had cheated on her math test and was ready to go to jail for it. A colleague of mine explained her the situation, and that she won't go to jail. The colleague made her a hot chocolate and called her parents so that they could pick up their daughter. Bless innocent dumb children. That's adorable. She did the crime. She was ready to stand tall and do the time. An old man I helped cross the street. He was super worried and kindly asked if I could help. I still remember him and pray for his wellness. Very sweet story. Bless you. The lady on my plane. I'm a flight attendant who got really mad I gave her too much coffee and then poured it into the seat back pocket. I realized that day that some people will get mad at whatever they can, and there's nothing I can do about that. The whole thing or just the excess? Unbelievable either way. This is a worse version of the people who say no when asked if they want room for cream, and then just pour it out in the trash can anyway. The trash bags don't always hold liquids. Things poke through, and having it full of hot liquid is just asking for a bag to break. But this is even worse. Clearly the seat back is not meant to hold any liquids. My mom, dad and I were driving across Canada to Ontario to see family when I was about 26. Now, we were stopped for the night at an RV park for the night, and I ended up playing on the playground with a little girl the same age as me. Her dad came over in a cut-off sleeve shirt and shorts and pushed us on the merry-go-round. Once he left, I vividly remember telling her that I had pictured her dad in a suit when she had talked about him, and her telling me that she'd never seen her dad in a suit. Bizarre the things our kid brains remember. About 15 years ago, in XGF, a buddy of mine and I went to downtown San Jose to go bar hopping. While walking, we were talking about the movie Sin City, and a guy who had just passed us spins around and introduces himself as Paul Vasquez. Tells us he's an actor. No, none of the Paul Vasquez's on IMDb or him. Says he heard us talking about Sin City and wanted to let us know that he's in town filming a movie called The Underground with Mickey Rourke. This movie does not exist. Says he wants to show us his headshot, and that it's in his car. Friend and GF didn't want to go, but I was feeling adventurous. He pops his trunk and it is full of headshots, but none of them his. Men and women of all sorts. He then offers to buy us all drinks at a bar, and he's gonna call up Mickey so we can go hang in his hotel. Well, we weren't about to go into a weird hotel with this loon, but we did plan on going to a bar anyways. So we went. My friend tells the bartender that we don't know this guy, and if he tries to stick us with the bill, we're not paying. Minutes later, Paul Vasquez is literally thrown out the door by security and disappears into the night, yelling back to us, "Don't worry, I'll call Mickey, and we can go hang with him later." Quote. I've lived in San Jose since I was 6, and I can guarantee that we have loonies like no other. In the East Coast you have heroin, the Great Plains you have meth, and on the West Coast you have loonies, probably on both. So glad you were feeling adventurous. Got stabbed during a mugging and legged it away from the scene. Edit. To clarify, I was the one being mugged, was full of adrenaline, but then got to a bus stop and started to go into mild shock. A woman, probably no older than 21, came and called an ambulance and sat with me and was very reassuring. It turned out I wasn't too badly hurt, the TBH in the circumstance and confusion. You just tend to think, fuck, I'm dying here. Her sitting with me was so appreciated. She was so tender and supportive, but also relatively calm and collected given the scenario. I didn't look too clever at the time and was covered in blood. That was 15 years ago, and still think of her. Robert. I think about him time to time. He was a man gardening in his yard right outside of downtown Denver a few years ago. I drove an hour and a half to Denver just to walk around the city after isolating myself alone in the house for weeks and weeks. A few years ago, not quarantine days. I figured in such a biggin' poppin' city I could blend in and anxiously wander around unnoticed. Well, I used to always listen to music while walking about, but because I was so anxious about finally leaving the house this time, I did not bring music, and walked around downtown Denver and the surrounding neighborhoods. Robert said a merry hello as I walked past him watering some little flowers in his garden, and we just got to talking about all sorts of stuff for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. He was the first person I had talked to in weeks, and he was very kind and told me he was happy for the company since everybody else who walked by was listening to headphones. Thank you for talking to me, Robert. I really needed to hear a compassionate and optimistic voice that day. Now I usually do not listen to music on walks and runs, and instead take the time to be more mindful of where I am and what is going on around me, and actually take the second to say hello to other folk and all that jazz. The mystery person who had signed an organ donor card. We should all be this stranger someday. Aaron C. We were at the beach in NC. Met you in the pool. We seemed to hit it off. Every time I listen to Come Down by Bush, still think of you. This had to be somewhere about 20 years ago. God, I'll never forget you. That's cute but also kinda sad. A woman that came to talk to me and my sister once when my mother threw a public fit in the lobby of a theater and my father dragged her aside to yell at her. She just came over and made small talk with us about the city. I knew why she was doing it, but she did it in a way that was not patronizing at all, and it was so unexpectedly kind to take the time to do that when most people would have just stared or awkwardly averted their gaze. Dude saved my life like 12 years ago. Was drowning at the beach in North Carolina, and he grabbed my arm and brought me to shore. I was too shaken up to even say thank you. He had been crying and got on a bus. A guy asked me if I was okay, and I said, I'm fine. I felt like I sounded short when I said it because of the way my voice was breaking due to being upset. I was so touched that this guy cared enough to ask. When he got off the bus, I looked out the window, and as I was giving him an appreciative smile, he gave me the middle finger and made a "fuck you" face. I laughed loudly. My whole bus journey cheered me right up. Slow_artichoke 1. I don't get it. Why would he react this way? That reminded me of this one time when I pulled up next to a school bus at a red light. I looked up, made eye contact with this random kid for a second, and as we're looking at each other, the kid flips me off. There's something very funny to me about getting flipped off by a strange child. I remember my family and I were at Applebee's or something. Don't remember. And I found a wallet next to me. I didn't think of it until a few minutes later a woman came by our table and asked have they seen a wallet. I picked up the wallet and gave it to the woman. The woman gave me a $5 bill to show gratitude. The girl on my running route who asked if she could run with me sometime, and I said, sure, and didn't give her my number to get hers. I met a nice lady in Switzerland. We were both tourists and my parents took a picture of us together. Never exchanged any form of contact to send her the picture or keep in touch. Walking into the grocery store one morning with my 1-year-old son sitting up in the seat of the cart, this old woman walks up to me and says, I am so glad you didn't have an abortion. I just looked at her and replied, yeah, me too. I just cackled. People are so weird. I saw a man under Grand Central Station engaged in a fight. What was interesting was his opponent. Something he did not have. You're not meant to talk about it? I've seen a fight from the bus when going to school. The fight took place in the bus stop and only the man fighting could see his opponent. It was an experience of a weird mix of emotions. I was doing volunteering time at a swimming event. I also had to check the swimmers in, ask for their name and make sure it matched the one on the list. This dude comes up and I ask what his name is and he's like, Toby. What's yours? So I check the list to make sure it's the right one and I'm totally blanking, or so I didn't really process his question, so I just said, I don't know. And off he went to swim. I am still cringing at myself for that one. Toby, if you're out here, hi I guess. Made EORL 0mm at Lane Lee. That is unclear at this time. I enjoy talking to strangers. There's such a freedom that you can be completely honest with someone and it doesn't matter, because you'll never likely see them again. I had a great conversation with a girl who sat opposite me on a train. This wasn't a flirty thing. I just thought she seemed cool. I don't know her real name, but her friends call her Jazz, as she is a musician. Think she was on her way to the Netherlands. Some guy named David. I met him at an airport. This happened when I was 7. He was kinda neat. Was helping my family out of luggage on the overhead bin and helped us translate. At the end he bought me a miniature Boeing 747. I still have it to this day and I will never forget him. I used to work for a 24/7 gas station when I was younger. 18 to 19 years old. I was always stuck on late shifts and found myself having to sweep outside, empty trash, etc. alone. I don't live in a bad area, but still, being that young and alone and after midnight could be quite scary. I quickly befriended a group of homeless. I would save the hot food we were supposed to dispose, and I would pass it out to them in exchange for doing some of the outside chores for me so I could stay inside. I actually never asked them to do it, and always planned on just giving them the food. But they were fearful something would happen to me. One particular homeless gentleman would find sticks and whittle me flowers or crowns. He would walk in, say how happy the love of his life was working that night, buy a bag of chips and water and pay. He would go outside, whittle for a bit, come in and give it to me and tell me to never leave him. It was never weird or creepy, and he would always say this in almost a theatric voice and would sometimes take a bow before he left. I found out later he did this because I looked like his late daughter. Seeing me smile would make him happy. Sadly, I left that job and have gone back many times trying to find him with no luck. He was just a stranger that would always make my night better. A Hasidic Jewish man at the bus stop. I was waiting for the 212 on La Brea near West Hollywood, LA. It was 6 in the morning. He was eating ice cream out of its gallon container. He would use his bare hands to scoop out chunks of ice cream and then feast on it like a lion eating a wildebeest. I'm fascinated by traditional Jewish culture in general. It's so esoteric from an outsider's POV, yet alluring and beautiful to learn about. Matter of fact, I had Babka for the first time yesterday. A ticket inspector in a train. It was a really cold day and the train was an hour late. So I was pissed. I entered the train with a look okay my face that could kill people. I had a sniffy nose. My beard was covered in ice and my head was red from the cold. The ticket inspector just had the biggest grin on her face and I just realized how I must look and just started laughing. Weird how a smile can brighten a mood so much. She really made my day. An old lady in a sweet shop who told 5-year-old me that I had such a nice bottom. Oh, this TS weird. I vividly remember walking into a sweet shop as a kid and being yelled at by the owner for taking too long to decide what I wanted. Read this as sweatshop and it had a totally different meaning. I swear I met the real-life Dale Gribble at the Sandpiper condominium in Port Aransas, TX in the summer of 2002. This dude looked tough and acted exactly like Dale Gribble from Koth. He was either playing the part, or was the real-life inspiration. He was from South Austin, where Mike Judge was living, and he has stated that many of the characters from Koth and Beavis and Butthead were people he had met while living in Austin. This dude weighed maybe $130, smoked like a freight train, had mirror-tint sunglasses and a trucker hat. He also had a GF wife that was clearly a mail-order bride from Central America. Fancy Fisticuffs 2341 points 15 hours ago, edited 2 hours ago. I've got a couple different people that stand out in my memory. A guy who told me I had pretty eyes once. It wasn't in a flirtatious way and I never saw him again. After that, it just made my day and I've never forgotten about it. A man who folded a dollar bill into an elephant to amuse my impatient toddler while we waited in a checkout line. He gave my son the elephant afterwards and still have it nearly 7 years later. Our local park is across the road from the National Guard Armory and the soldiers run the track. Sometimes, my son was beside himself with excitement about this. A couple of the soldiers saw this and ran over to introduce themselves. One of them even pulled a little Velcro flag from their uniform and gave it to him. He was maybe 4 at the time but still remembers it and has the utmost respect for the military because of those men. I can relate to the story of the compliment. It's weird how simple compliments can stay with people for a long time. I remember an old man complimenting my outfit by saying, "I am glad there still are young girls dressing properly, like yourself. There's still hope in this world." Wasn't flirty. Haven't seen him since. Not sure if we'd recognize each other either. But I still think about Tala Atl, either the electrician who came out in lockdown to get our power working again. It's a long story. Or an old guy who once told me to take a bag off of my head. PLs tell us the story. I was in an outdoor cafe with my parents and an insufferably obnoxious girl in the adjacent table was berating the waiter for having failed to fulfill some ridiculously trivial request as she was young and attractive and radiated an entitlement born of obscene wealth and privilege. During the middle of her tirade, I locked eyes with an elderly black woman at another table, and she gave me the most animated and succinct expression of "these white bitches" I've ever encountered. Her face was so cinematic and expressive that it should have been preserved for posterity as a meme. Her face is etched deep in my mind. Best story here. I'd pay good money for a recording or picture of that. Whenever you see stuff like that, call them out on it. The staff can't, but you can. After my last play my senior year in drama club, some guy came up to me and said my name and told me that I had done some of the best acting he's ever seen in his life. It hit me later that night that he and multiple other people who said "good job Milk LVR 23" liked my performance so much that then thought, "Wow, who's the girl playing X?" and looked me up in the program. I'm a theater performance major, so I felt like it was confirmation that this is what I should do with my life. Several years ago, I was hobbling down the street in an air boot, having screwed up my ankle in some way or other. I walked past an electrician's van. The owner was sitting there in the open rear door, also sporting an air boot. We chuckled at the coincidence. And then he said in a thick Eastern European accent, "Life is like a baby's shit. Short and shitty. Never gonna forget that guy." When I first visited US, I took the CTA from O'Hare to downtown Chicago and there was this older black gentleman in a perfect white suit, white fedora and round sunglasses. He looked absolutely stunning and stylish and I'll never forget him. Hobo named Fingers. Didn't have any. Same reason my dad named me Self-Esteem. There was a cute boy at my McDonald's and being lonely in quarantine is killing me. This chick from a 3 Days Grace concert She was standing behind me. We were both pretty drunk and we were singing along to all the songs together. It was really fun, but the thought never crossed my mind to ask her for her name. She was there with who I assume was her boyfriend. But still, it was cool. When I was a kid on the edge of puberty while on a vacation in Utah, I played volleyball with this gorgeous, slightly older girl at a campground. The memory especially sticks out because she wasn't at all a total asshole like most of the kids from my hometown. This guy the first saw down the main street of my hometown. His car was full of junk and he hopped out of the driver's side with a kettle and he was looking for something in the back seat, spilling the water everywhere. He must have been homeless or sleeping rough and looking for a PowerPoint to make some tea. The strangers who drove after my car to give me my debit card after I had left in the ATM like a ETS. I was pumping gas when an SUV came flying into the parking lot. A man got out and started screaming at me that I had cut him off and almost killed him. I told him he must be mistaken, because my truck has a large fuel tank and I've been pumping gas for the past 4 minutes, so there's no way it could have been me. He continues to yell and follow me into the store and wins $100 on a scratch-off ticket. Fuck that guy. Dollar me cola eater li me clie. Adi la uecm lo aupp. 4. All I wanted to see was the Hulk movie. My parents didn't agree with my arguments to go to the movie. Surprising, right? So they had this pair of black friends. Both guys. In my little mind, they did everything together. They were like a team for real. So they pulled me to the side one day and explained the plan. I was to be silent and say yes at some point. They offered to take me to a kiddie movie so my parents would have a night to themselves. But in reality, we had the best time watching The Incredible Hulk. I thought that was literally the coolest thing in the world. It was my first taste of victory. I have no clue who they are. I haven't seen them in forever. Nor do I have any other particular memories of this pair. Whoever they are, I hope they are faring well in 2020. I used to take the bus to work. Every so often an old woman would get on who looked exactly like my grandmother who passed away 20 years ago. I think about these encounters from time to time. Should I have approached her? Even though it's completely ridiculous. Did she have a twin? Do I see dead people? A whole host of crazy questions on an average bus ride. At a hotel in Canada, a guy from Korea who spoke no English just reached over and lifted the toaster handle so I could get the toast out. I was carrying too much stuff to do it easily on my own. It was the way he did it, without hesitation or embarrassment. To this day, I try to be like him and jump in and help immediately. Burst into stall to help pull up strangers' pants. I always talk to people in line at Comic-Cons but rarely keep in touch. I have a lot of answers I could put here, but a couple years ago a mom and her probably 7-year-old daughter let me borrow a prop for a photo op with my favorite actor. It's my favorite photo op out of the 3 I have just with him and out of the approximately 60 I have with various actors. We waited in line together. The little girl was using the prop in her photo too, and it ended up being a while because everything was running late. So we just talked about the TV show the actor is from. I see the mom and daughter all the time in online convention groups, but I've never run into them again even though we go to a lot of the same cons. Era_44 25 points 14 hours ago, edited 12 hours ago. Once, in my school, I was crying. I don't know why, maybe cause I was frustrated and was very young. Then a girl, younger than me, came to help. She talked to me, calmed me down and I eventually stopped crying. I was kinda embarrassed cause it was supposed to be the other way round. I should help her when she's crying. I don't remember her face or name but I still. Auntie. Oh Tammy Sele Moro. I fucked your mom 21 points 15 hours ago, edited 7 hours ago. Back in my foolish days I was a Mormon missionary. I stopped at a red light and a homeless dude came to the window. I rolled it down to see if he'd accept a gospel message. But he just wanted some change. I told him I didn't have any, but he saw a few quarters in the cup holder. I gave them to him and asked what his name was. He looked me dead in the eye, took a big-ass step backward, and loudly proclaimed, "They call me Rainbow in the dark." Then the light turned green. By Taze. I remember walking home from school. I have a rolling backpack. I saw an old man walking in a walker. I moved out of the way to let him through. He seemed to like me after that and he thanked me for letting him through. He also wanted to know how I got there and I answered and yeah. At the end of our conversation he said, "Have a nice day," and we walked off. I was about 8 when I went to the mall with my parents. I was waiting outside of a store by myself when a younger man called me over across the walkway. I don't remember his face at all. I just remember he was wearing a suit and he had scars all over his hands like dozens of 1-inch knife cuts. He told me to take something and held out an Eisenhower dollar coin. I took it and went back outside the store to wait. He was gone when I turned around. I think about him every month or so. Paul Marini. When I was about 5 or 6, my mom, 2 brothers, and I were homeless for a short amount of time. My mom and an ex had broken up and all I remember is us packing up our stuff in the middle of the night and leaving. I think we drove for a little while. Somehow, this older woman with a nice home and an extra bedroom let us stay with her. I know I'd never been to this place or met her, and I don't remember her name to this day. We had a king-sized air mattress and we were all sleeping on it together, rewatching the Spy Kids movie over and over again because I guess it's the only one we had. She had a miniature recliner by the front door, and I remember I would go down and sit there daily due to lack of space in the room, and would always say, "This is the best seat in the house." Quote, "It was the perfect size for me being so little, so I was the only one who sat in it." I don't know how long we were there. It could have been a week or a month, but when we left she told me to take the recliner with us. She knew I loved it and she gave it to me. Later years it was broken because my brothers were teenage boys and of course they were going to sit in it and break it. That recliner. Conte MWEEOEMM roll cow AQEM ALEMUULLE real Henry May later. For me now, that woman was really kind for that. Sitting in the car eating outside of a Mexican restaurant during quarantine and everyone is coming and going with their to-go orders. An older woman stops in her tracks and inquires to an old man about his Air Force hat. She asks about when he served, and turns out they're both veterans. She's sharp as a tack, confident, drop-dead gorgeous for her age, and turned out to be very accomplished in the Air Force during Vietnam. I believe. The man looked absolutely enthralled and they ended up having so much to talk about. My boyfriend and I watched the encounter like a movie. The woman called the man darling as she bid farewell. I will never forget her, and I doubt relearned N. TC 1010 OLVIO1A or Team 1CO equals EML equals D Mool Old Momi VCRB Latam Let Me Happy. The very normal looking athletic dude that just flipped out at the subway because they didn't have any, forget the ingredient, left, was such a weird thing to see. It wasn't the workers' fault. When I was in 6th grade, a friend and I went to hang out on an undeveloped vacant lot just near our school. Suddenly a seemingly homeless man approached us. He was carrying what looks like a vintage analog camera. He politely asked us if he could take our pictures. We did not think anything of it and just strike up a pose. I never saw the man again. Not even sure if that camera. Ellen Billis. There's this boy I shared table with on a drawing competition. I'm introverted and rarely talk to strangers, but at that time I think I was high on spirits because of nervousness. We just chatted the whole competition. We were so loud the instructor told us off, and I was so happy I made friends. That evening, I saw him again on the souvenir stalls. I smiled at him, but he acted like he never knew who I was. Well, that was traumatic. It haunted me for years and never talked again to strangers. When I was in university, I accidentally frightened a couple of guys. One stormy night, I had to walk to the parking garage to move my car after a hailstorm. To avoid the ticket in the morning, it was past midnight, so instead of dressing up, I went barefoot in my pajamas. It didn't matter anyway, since I only walked in the dark places. I'm nervous. Along the way, I noticed many earthworms had been trampled, so I began to pick up the living ones to move them somewhere safe. Sorry, dudes. I just needed to get my car.